Greetings all. In this video here, I'm going to be working on some support for my Celestial Lions and a personal favourite of mine, the Storm Speeder. Not quite sure why I like it so much, I just think it's cool, though I do see room for some improvement, hence this video. With the Celestial Lion's history of being susceptible to orc snipers, I figured they would definitely take some liberties with the holy designs of the Omnissiah and reinforce the crew compartment. Also, the little guy poking his head out of the top right next to a couple missile launchers isn't probably the greatest choice in the world, so I will be doing something about that too. So I began by building the bases of the Storm Speeder, right up to about here in the instruction manual, as most of the work is going to be on armouring up this crew area. The bulk of this build is using some plasticard. This one is actually quite thick, which looks great for an armoured plate, but is a pain to cut in comparison to the thinner stuff, so it is a bit of a trade-off. Also, it occurs to me that I might need to work on my lighting setup some more. Now, to make life a little bit easier, I've used some bits of cereal box to make a few templates for the plates I will be making out of the plasticard. I usually don't bother with such extravagant planning, but as the speeder is quite a big kit, I didn't want to risk making a costly mistake. With the templates set, I can transfer them to the plastic card using my knife to mark out, as I couldn't find a marker that didn't rub off immediately, then using a combination of clippers, knife and patience to cut them out and give them a clean up around the edges. The first piece I cut out was the door section, and this would need a little more adjustment as a speeder door has a little indented section which I didn't quite account for in my template. So using my knife as a very scientific measuring tool, I worked out where it would need to be on the door plate, marked it out with my knife, and then took the clippers to it. The next adjustment I would be making would be to create an indent on the opposite side of the plate so the marine inside can see out of the side. Now I will note here that my original plan was to have the whole thing be totally enclosed with two slits to look out of either side, but after some thinking I decided I would change that up slightly later on. So for now I use my clipper and knife combo again to cut one half of the indented vision slit. Now, using a similar method to what I have used on these sides, I made the top and the front, cutting out the various pokey outy bits and indents in exactly the same manner. However, the front would need a vision slit cut in it. And now we cut to a little bit later in the build, after I've already made one side and worked out how I will be doing it. And here, I'm going to be working on the front panel, so carefully measuring where I want the hole for the front vision slit. This one will be a pain in the backside to do with just a knife by scoring it until I've made the little window hole. Now, an easier method would be to use a drill to make a hole and then maybe a jeweler's saw or an equivalent to saw the vision slit, but I didn't have one of those handy, so knife it is. With that done, I have some offcuts of this plastic card which I'm going to use to make an edge to the vision slit. A drop of plastic glue will hold them well enough, and once they have set I can cut them a little better to size. You can do the cutting beforehand, but they are quite small and fiddly, so I figured it would be easier to stick them down first. As I had decided to keep the size to this roll cage thing here, I could add that now after removing the rather large mold line on it, and could measure up the panel that will go above it. Originally, it would sit on top of the door panel, but now it would need a little bit off the bottom to sit behind this bar instead. So, a quick snip with the clippers, and I can begin to put this side together. As the bottom of the door is fairly independent of the other pieces, I added that one first using my plastic glue. The gaps between the panels wasn't great, but I have seen worse on some of my older edition models, and it's nothing a bit of putty can't fix. That, and I am kind of going for the look of they've created it themselves and haven't had the Mechanicus doing all the fancy work for them. Now at this stage, I decided that the armour on the front needed a bit more and cut a second front panel to sit just behind the first. I mean, logically, most of the heavy shots will come from the front, right? So you'd want more armour there. Once the first of the front panels was glued in place, I added the roof and then glued the extra front panel into place as well. And unless your template is perfect, the chances are there will be a few gaps, but this isn't the end of the world. Greenstuff exists. With the crew compartment nicely armoured, I would move on to Brother Tinnitus at the top here. Basically, I don't want him there. But if I were to just cut him off and put a hatch there, it would imply that maybe, just maybe, he would pop up at some point. So instead, I'm going to use some more plasticard to make a more solid looking turret. To do this, I made myself another template from card of the sides and cut out some plastic card again. Then I would be removing the roll cage bars this time, as I would just get in the way. A nice quick job for the cutters, just out of shot so no one can see how blunt they are getting. I could then bring in some glue and attach the side pieces I had made. There's still a big old gap around the shoulder areas, another job for the Greenstuff. Now, to give this some decoration as it would otherwise look awfully plain, I have this front panel spare from the venerable Dreadnought, and I'm going to use the lower half of it with the Aquila on. Trimming it off just above this, it would only need a little knife work here and there to make it fit nicely on the front of the turret. For the top, I used yet another template to cut another panel from the plastic card, gave it a good clean up with my knife and attached it in place. And after a long tea break, it was set enough that I could come in with my knife and tidy the edges of this plastic a little. Now, I could have left the turret like this, but I felt that it needed something else, and that the Space Marine who now sits inside grumpily would probably need another way to see where he is aiming. The little sensor thing that would normally go on top of the turret, I would instead put down the front, but to do this I would need to cut it off at a bit of an angle so it can kind of sit in there. So now, after talking about Greenstuff a lot in this video, I mix up some Milliput just to spite my future self. Starting on the turret, I could add it to the various gaps and holes that would not look great in the end model. With the turret filled out, I could move to the crew compartment and put it on all of the edges. I'm not too worried about making it perfectly square at the corners here, as I am planning to clean it up with a knife once everything is set. Whilst that dried, I could build up most of the rest of the speeder, and for a bit of additional decoration, I want to use this lion head from the Stormcast Vindictus shoulder pad, but I don't want to have a Stormcast missing an arm. To counter this, I decided to use some blue stuff, a heat-activated plastic stuff that you can use to make molds of parts. In this case, a shoulder pad, and like half the arm too. And here's one I made earlier. Using the mold and some Milliput, I have this not too bad lion's head shoulder that I can use to decorate my speeder. Taking my knife, I would need to remove the skull on top of the gun casing area. I would also use my clippers to remove the little pokey out bit of the front of the casing, and with some super glue, the lion head can be added in and let to set. Whilst that is going on, a whole day had passed and the Milliput had hardened enough that I can come in with my knife, though a file and even sandpaper would work, and cleaning up the flat areas and edges of the panel. As another decorative touch, and to fill out the roof area / distract from the join lines, I'm going to use this Aquila from the Rhino kit. A little plastic glue and it can be added right on the top. Maybe they figure that if they stick enough Imperial decorations on the thing, it will distract from the fact that they committed some tech heresy by modifying that land speeder. Now, one final thing to do before painting this up will be to use a bit more Milliput around the edges of this lion head shoulder at the front here, so it looks a little bit less like a shoulder and more like a moulded gun case decoration. And with that, we are done with the modifications. A bit of final construction, paint and basing later, and my Celestial Lions have a nicely armoured storm speeder ready to take into battle. I think in honour of their past, I shall call it the Armageddon pattern. Perhaps that will sound official enough to keep the tech priest happy and off my back for a while, and with the extra plating, no surprisingly accurate green-skinned marksmen dressed in all black and looking rather like members of the Assassinorum will hopefully snipe these guys out of the sky. Hopefully. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a while since I did one, and I wanted to try something bigger than your average infantry model, as I have a fairly large project coming up, and wanted to get in a little practice. If you did enjoy it, then why not drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. So stay safe, and have a good one.